They never told me I had moved out. I found out in June, in the parking lot, because my space had somebody else's car in it, and the sticker on my windshield had been voided. 19 years in that space. I went to the office, and the girl turned her screen around and showed me. Unit 3B, owner K Harbor Holdings, occupant status tenant, and a line underneath saying the owner resides off-site as of March the 9th. I was standing in the building I had slept in the night before, holding my mail. 34 years I put my hands inside other people's air handlers in that county. Nobody ever asked me to prove I was alive before. My name is Ruben Delgado Santiago. I am 76. I live in Ocean Cay Village, which is 312 units on Estero Bay, 4-store blocks, built in 78. Everybody over 55 and half of us over 70. If this is your kind of story, subscribe to True Deceit Stories and tell me in the comments where you are listening from. I do read them. Let me back up, because the parking lot was June, and this starts in February. In February, my son's wife brought me a folder. Marisol is 44. She has been married to my son Elias for 21 years, and I have never once had an argument with her, which I want you to hold on to because it matters later. She sat at my kitchen counter and said it was a management agreement. She said with the insurance the way it is now, and the assessments, and the fact that I was the only one of us who could not drive at night anymore, it made sense to put the unit under something that could handle the paperwork. She used the word structure. She said, "This just gives us a structure." 9 pages. I read 2. I have heard men my age tell these stories, and somehow they always read everything and were suspicious from the start. I was not suspicious. I read 2 pages and sent on the flag she put there, and I was glad somebody was handling something. What I signed did 2 things. It deeded my unit to a company called K Harbor Holdings, and it came with an affidavit, which I did not read at all, saying that as of March the 9th, I resided with family at an address in Lehigh Acres, 20 miles inland. I have never spent one night in Lehigh Acres. Now I need to tell you what that second piece actually costs a man in Florida, because if you do not live here, it sounds like a clerical detail, and it is not. It is the whole thing. In this state, your homestead is not just a tax break. It is protection. As long as that unit is my permanent residence, it cannot be taken for most debts, and it cannot be quietly loaded up with a mortgage without me. The tax exemption saves me around $4,000 a year, which matters, but the protection is what actually stands between an old man and people who want his address. Take away the homestead and the unit stops being a home. It becomes an asset. That is what the affidavit did. 1 line. Resides off-site as of March the 9th. The Sundays stopped in April. For 11 years, Elias came on Sundays. He would bring my grandson Wilmer, and I would make the coffee too strong on purpose, because it was a joke between us, and they would stay 2 hours. In April, they came twice. In May, once. Nobody announced anything. Nobody said, "We are not doing Sundays now." It just thinned out. The way water goes out of a pan you have not noticed is cracked. I thought it was work. Elias runs a crew, and the season had started. The truth, which I got much later, and from a different person, is that my son had signed as a manager of K Harbor Holdings, and that he could not sit in my kitchen for 2 hours and not tell me. He was not brave enough to say it, and not shameless enough to sit there. So he did the third thing, which is nothing. In May, somebody put a lockbox on my door. Not the building's door, my door. The gray metal kind that hangs off the handle so an agent can get the key. I came up from the mail, and there was this thing on my own front door, and for a second. And I am not exaggerating this for you. For a second, I thought I was on the wrong floor. I stood there and checked the number twice. Then I went and got a screwdriver and took it off, and I put it on the kitchen counter, and I sat and looked at it. I heard how they talked about it on the last Sunday in May. Elias did come that once. He brought Wilmer and he stayed 40 minutes instead of 2 hours. And at some point, he went out into the walkway to take a call, and left the slider open 4 inches. And I was in the kitchen with the water off. It was Marisol on the other end. I could hear her because he had it on speaker, resting on the rail, the way people do when they are also doing something else. She was talking about the lockbox. She was annoyed that it had come off. She said the agent had driven out from Bonita for nothing, and Elias said something I could not make out, and there was a pause, and then she said it. She said, "He doesn't live there. He just keeps his things there." Not angrily. That is what I need you to understand about the whole thing. She said it the way you would say a shelf is load-bearing or it is not. It was not an insult, and she was not building a case for anybody's benefit. There was nobody to persuade. It was simply what she believed the situation was. He doesn't live there. He just keeps his things there. I had slept in that bedroom the night before, and every night for 17 years. My razor was in the bathroom. There was a chicken thawing in my sink at that exact moment, and I stood in the kitchen and understood that, in her head, I had already gone. That the man in Unit 3B was a set of belongings with a pulse, and that the apartment was between tenants. I did not go out onto the walkway. I turned the water back on and finished the pan. Elias came in 5 minutes later and said he had to get going, and I said, "All right." And he took Wilmer down, and that was the last Sunday until the following spring. I have gone back over that afternoon many times, and the thing that stays with me is not what she said. It is that my son was standing there while she said it, holding the phone, and did not say, "Dad is right there." I want to explain something about my trade here, because everything I did afterwards came out of it. When a system is not working, everybody in the room has a theory. The owner has a theory. The wife has a theory. The man who was here last year and did it wrong has a theory. And every one of those theories is about intentions. The machine does not have a theory. The machine has pressures. You put your gauges on the ports. You read what is on the low side and what is on the high side. You feel the line, and the system tells you what it is doing, whether anybody likes it or not. I have spent my whole life on the side of the argument that cannot lie and cannot be talked out of its position. That is not wisdom, it is just what I know how to do. So I did not call Marisol and ask about the lockbox. I went to the county property appraiser's website, which took me an hour and a half because I am 76 and it is not built for me. And I found my unit. Owner, K Harbor Holdings LLC. Homestead exemption, removed. I sat there a long time. The next thing I did is the thing I would want you to do, and it cost me nothing. I went to legal aid. There is an office in Fort Myers, and they have a man named Alonzo Fitch who does homestead cases. And I got 20 minutes with him on a Thursday because somebody canceled. I told him all of it in about 8 minutes. He asked me 3 questions. Did you sign a deed? Did you sign an affidavit about where you live? And do you have anything at all that shows you were physically in that unit between March and now? Yes, probably, without knowing it. And I did not know. He was straight with me, and I have thought about that conversation almost every day since. He said, "Mr. Delgado, here is your problem. Everything they have is written down and recorded. Everything you have is you saying so. In a hearing, a recorded document beats a sincere old man about 9 times in 10, and the 10th time is when the old man has something physical. I ask what counts as physical, he said. Something that existed before anybody was arguing. Something that got made without anybody deciding to make it. And I said, I have a burned compressor in a box. He said, tell me about the compressor. So I told him about August, except August had not happened yet, because this was June. I told him about what was going to happen, in a way, because I already knew what my system was doing. Let me put this plainly. My air handler is in the hall closet, which is how every unit in Ocean K is built. The condenser is out on the slab behind the building with the others. That system had been running hard all spring because I was in the unit and I am 76 and I keep it at 76. A compressor is a motor sitting in oil inside a sealed can. It fails one of two ways. If it sits idle, it corrodes. Slowly, dry, from the outside in, and when you cut it open, it looks like something that was left in a shed. If it runs and something goes wrong, low charge, a bad capacitor, restricted airflow, it cooks. The windings burn under load, the oil turns acid, and when you crack that can open it, smells like nothing else on earth, and the copper is black and varnished. Any technician alive can tell those two apart in the time it takes to lean over it. And a compressor that is switched off, in a unit nobody lives in, does not cook. It cannot. There is no load. You would have to make one up. Fitch listened to the whole thing, and then he said the sentence that organized the next 5 months of my life. He said, "None of that is evidence yet. Right now it is your air conditioner. It becomes evidence the minute somebody with authority is standing there watching it come out of the wall." I said I understood, and I did, because that is exactly how it works with a warranty claim. You do not open the compressor and then call the manufacturer. You call the manufacturer and you open it in front of their man. He said, "So do not touch it, do not have it serviced, do not have it cleaned." And I said, "It is June in Florida." And he said, "I know. That is what I did all summer. I lived with a failing system on purpose. This was not noble. It was miserable." By the end of July, that unit ran 7 degrees warmer than it should have, and I slept on top of the sheets with a fan aimed at my chest. And twice I called the elevator, because I did not trust myself on the stairs. But I had one thing, and it was inside that closet, and a service call would have cleaned it off in 40 minutes. Because here is the second half of it, and this is the part nobody outside the trade knows. The compressor is what fails. The coil is what remembers. An evaporator coil is a slab of aluminum fins behind your filter, and every cubic foot of air in your home goes through it. In a unit somebody lives in, that coil loads up. Skin, carpet fiber, whatever you cook, the dog if you have one. It builds a gray felt on the entry face, packed into the fins, and after a season you can put your thumb on it, and it does not move. In a unit nobody lives in, with the system off, there is no air being pulled. Dust settles. It lies flat on top like dust on a shelf, and you can blow it off. Loaded coil, somebody lives there. Flat dust, nobody does. That is not an opinion. That is not my word against hers. That is a physical object in a closet, and it takes any technician in Lee County about 10 seconds. So I let it load. In April, I had taken my gauges down off the closet shelf. They are a manifold set in a yellow case. Mine, 31 years old, and I had not opened that case in 11 years. It sat up there like a picture of a job I used to have. I started checking my own system on Saturdays. Breaker off, panel, gauges on the ports, read the low side, read the high side, write it down. And I wrote it on masking tape stuck to the closet door frame, because that is where I have written readings my entire life. Date and suction pressure. April the 9th, and then every week after. I was not building a case. I want that understood. In April, I did not know there would be a case. I could not stand next to a running system and not know its numbers. The same way a man who counted money for a living cannot leave a stack uncounted on a table. That habit turned out to be the whole thing, and I did not do it for that reason. And I think that is true of most of what saves people. Pearl, in 2C, started signing them in May. She is 81, and she comes up the stairs to the mailboxes at the same time I do. I asked her one Saturday if she would put her initials under the last line, and she asked what it was for, and I said I would rather not say yet, because if I said it, she would have to carry it. She thought about that and said, "All right," and she signed every Saturday, from May to November, and never asked me again. When it finally mattered, she stood in front of the county and described exactly what she had seen and nothing she had not, and I have never been so grateful to anybody. In June, the HOA made me a tenant. That is the word on the form. Occupant status, tenant. It meant I lost the parking space because tenants park on the far lot, which is 210 yards from the door. I paced it. 210 yards does not sound like anything. I have a bad hip, and it is 101 degrees here in June, and that walk is the difference between going out and not going out. That is the part I did not expect. It was not the money. It was that they made my building further away. In July, the tax bill came, and it did not come to me. It went to K Harbor Holdings at Marisol's address, because the county sends the bill to the owner of record. $4,100 more than the year before, because the exemption was gone. I only know the number because Fitch pulled it. I never saw the paper. There is something about that I still cannot get comfortable with. My house cost $4,000 more that year, and I was not told, because on paper I was nobody in that transaction. And in August, the compressor went. It went at about 4 in the morning on a Tuesday. I heard it, because I have heard that sound in other people's buildings for 34 years, and it is the last thing that motor ever says. Then, nothing, and the fan running warm air, and by 6 the unit was 88 degrees. I called the office at 8. Nadia Brisbois, the property manager, took it down and then called me back an hour later and said something that I want to read to you, exactly as I wrote it on the back of an envelope, because I could not believe it while she was saying it. She said, "The owner has to approve the repair, and the owner is the LLC, so I have sent it to them." I said, "Nadia, I am standing in it." And she said, "I know, Mr. Delgado. I am sorry. That is the process now." 11 days. 11 days in August, in Florida, on the 3rd floor, waiting for my son's wife to sign a form so that a machine in my own closet could be fixed. I sat those days out at the pool deck under the awning where there was some moving air. And what I mostly felt was not rage. It was embarrassment. I did not want anybody asking why I was sitting out there all day. I did not want to explain that I could not get my own air conditioner fixed. 80-year-old men in that building would have understood immediately and would have been kind about it. And I could not stand the idea of it. That is what these things actually do to you. They do not make you angry in a useful way. They make you not want to be seen. On the 4th day, I nearly called my brother. Tito is 71, in Kissimmee, and we have not really spoken since 2011, when he told me at a christening that I was raising the boy soft and that it would cost me one day. I had his number up on the phone on the pool deck. I did not press it, not because I was still angry about 2011. Because if I called him with this, then he was right, and he had been right for 12 years, and I would have to say so out loud. I put the phone in my pocket and went and got more water. That was the 4th day of August, and it is the single decision in this whole story I would take back. They replaced the compressor on the 19th. The technician was a kid, maybe 26, from a company I did not know. And he was polite, and he was quick, and he did it correctly. I watched him from the hallway and did not say one word about the trade. Because a man leaning over your shoulder telling you he used to do this is the worst thing that can happen to a young technician. When he pulled the old one, he set it on cardboard in the walkway and started to load it for scrap, and I asked him to leave it. He said, "We usually take these." I said, "I would like to keep it," and he took about a second over it and then said, "Sure," and put it in a box and slid it against my wall, and that box sat in my hallway from August the 19th until the day the county came. I did not tell him why. He did not ask. Here is the thing I have thought about since. That kid could not have known that leaving a broken part with an old man would end up costing a woman her house and her record. He made a 2-second polite decision. That is how most of this goes. In September, Marisol applied for a mortgage against my unit. Fitch found it. $140,000 against a unit with no homestead protection on it anymore, owned by a company she controlled. And that was the moment the shape of the whole thing changed for me. Up to then, I had been telling myself a story where this was about the rent. $2,200 a month in season, which is real money, and people do worse for less. But you do not need to remove somebody's homestead to collect rent. You need to remove it to borrow against the place. They were not renting my home, they were spending it. In October, she went to the board. There is a meeting on the second Wednesday, and Pearl goes to all of them. I had filed a written objection to the occupancy reclassification, 3 paragraphs, and Fitch had helped me keep it short. Pearl told me afterward, and she told the county later under oath, that Marisol stood up and said that Mr. Delgado has been confused since the spring, and that the family was handling his affairs, and the board should not be acting on things he sends in. Confused since the spring. I had been keeping a weekly log of 2 pressures on masking tape on a door frame since April the 9th, with a witness signature under every line. I have thought about which one of us was keeping better records. And I am not being clever. I mean it seriously. She had a story, and I had a machine. And in November, she asked the county to come and look. That is not a typo, and it is the part people do not believe when I tell it in person. She requested the homestead audit herself. She had to. You cannot get clean title for a lender with a residency question sitting open on the file. She needed the county to walk through, confirm the unit was not owner-occupied, and close it out. She scheduled it for a Tuesday, because on Tuesdays, I have dialysis at 10. I moved my dialysis to Monday, November the 14th, 10 in the morning, 5 people in my kitchen. The field agent from the property appraiser's office, a woman named Delphine Osei, with a tablet and a lanyard, Nadia Brisbois from the office. Marisol. Fitch because I asked him and I had the right to. And the same young technician from August, because Fitch had called his company and asked them to send whoever pulled the compressor, and the company had sent him. Marisol had not expected 2 of those people. OC ran it by the form. How long has the unit been owned by the LLC? Who occupies it? Is there a lease? Where does Mr. Delgado reside? Marisol answered every question well. She was calm and she was organized, and she had the file. She said I had been living with them in Lehigh Acres since March, and that I came out to the unit sometimes, and that my things were still here because there had not been time to move them. OC wrote it down. Then she turned to me and asked where I slept last night. I said, in the bedroom, 20 feet from where you are standing, and I have slept there every night since 2006. And she said, all right. And she wrote that down too, and I understood exactly what that meant. It meant it was 2 people saying things. So I said, may I show you something in the closet? What happened next took about 4 minutes. I opened the hall closet. On the inside of the door frame there was masking tape, 31 strips, top to bottom, and on each one a date and a number in my handwriting, and under most of them a set of initials in a different pen. I said, April the 9th, 68 PSI. April the 16th, 67. Every Saturday since. The initials are Pearl Ivy in 2C, who is downstairs and who will come up if you want her. OC looked at the tape for a while. Then she asked the question I had been waiting 5 months for, and she asked it in a slightly different voice. She said, What is the pressure a reading of? And I said, the suction side of the system in this closet. You cannot read it unless the system is running. It does not run unless somebody has it on. And I am the only person who has been in here. Then I asked the technician to open the air handler. Fitch had cleared this in advance, and OC allowed it. The kid took the panel off with a nut driver, and he had that panel off in maybe 40 seconds, and then he stopped. Because he saw it before anybody said anything to him. He said, out loud, to nobody, "Oh, this is packed." Osei asked him what that meant. And here is the thing I could never have manufactured, and this is why Fitch made me wait for a stranger with authority, instead of taking pictures in June. That young man had no idea what he was deciding. He did not know there was a fight. He answered a technical question the way you answer it on any Tuesday. He said, "The coil is loaded on the entry face. That is a season of use, minimum. You get this from air being pulled through a lived-in space, cooking, carpet, skin." He put a finger on it, and it did not come away. Osei asked, "What would it look like if nobody had been living here since March?" He said, "Dust on top. Loose. You could blow it off. There would be nothing packed into the fins because nothing would have been pulling air through them." Then Fitch said, "And the old compressor is here as well." The kid looked at the box against my wall and said, "That is the one I pulled in August." Osei asked what killed it, and he said, "Burned out. You can smell it. Windings cooked, oil is acid." He turned it in the box with his boot, the way they do. He said, "That is a motor that died working. A unit that sits switched off does not do this. It corrodes, it does not cook." Nobody said anything for a moment, and then Osei turned to Nadia Brisbois and asked her one question. She asked, "Before you listed this unit as a seasonal rental in May, did you enter it?" Nadia said no. Osei asked, "Did anyone from the office enter it?" And Nadia said, "No, we listed it off the owner's instruction." I watched Marisol's face while that happened, and it was not what I had spent 5 months imagining. It was not fear, it was irritation. She turned to Nadia like a woman whose contractor has let her down. That was the moment I finally understood who I had been dealing with. She was not a criminal in her own mind at all. She was a person managing an asset, and one of her vendors had just failed to hold a line. Osei closed the tablet and said she was suspending the residency determination pending review, and that the affidavit would be referred. And I did not know what any of that meant, procedurally, but I knew what it meant in the room. They all went out into the hall, and at the door I said the one thing I had been saving. I said, "Marisol, the tape on that door frame starts April the 9th. She said, "So?" I said, "The LLC was formed in February, and the affidavit was recorded March the 9th, and I started writing on that door frame in April because my system was short on charge, and I wanted to watch it. Not because of you. I did not know about you in April. You spent 7 months building a story about an empty apartment. It was being measured the entire time by a man who was not even looking at you." She did not answer that. She went to the elevator. The homestead was restored in January and backdated, so the 4,100 came off. The deed was set aside in March. The mortgage application had already been withdrawn by the lender in December, the day after the county opened the file, because no lender wants a residency question with a referral attached to it. Curtis Vandeveer, the notary, surrendered his commission rather than go to the hearing. He had certified an affidavit whose affiant was never in front of him, which, in this state, is the end of a notary, and he knew it before anybody had to explain it to him. Nadia Brisbois was not charged with anything. She lost her job at Ocean Cay in February. I have seen her twice since, at the Publix on San Carlos, and both times we said hello, and neither of us pretended not to see the other, and I think that is the correct amount. Marisol was charged under the statute about filing a false document affecting real property. She took a plea. 18 months of probation, restitution of the rent she had collected, which was $9,400, and no jail, and I did not ask for jail, and I would not have. Elias was never charged. He was a manager on a company filing. He did not sign the affidavit, and nobody could show he read it. My son and I speak now. He comes on Sundays again and has since the spring. We have never once discussed the 11 days in August, and I have decided that we are not going to, because I have watched men my age hold a thing over their children for 20 years, and I have seen what is left at the end of it. But he does not look at me for very long at a time. That has not come back, and I do not think it will. Wilmer changes the filter with me on the first Sunday of the month. He is 12 now. He does the sequence himself. Breaker off, latch, slide the old one out, write the date on the new one, latch, breaker on. He stutters, badly, and it is worse when somebody is waiting on him to say something. In that closet, nobody is waiting on him to say anything, because the job has a sequence and the sequence does the talking. I worked that out in the second month, and I have never mentioned it to him, and I never will. Tito died in March, before the deed was set aside. He heard about all of it from a cousin, and he sent me a message in January that said, "I am glad you are all right," and nothing else. No reference to 2011. Nothing about being right. I read it and I did not answer because I was going to answer properly, when I had time, when I could do it well. That was mine. He did not do that to me, and neither did she. I did it on a pool deck in August with the phone in my hand, and then 8 more months after that. The compressor is still in my hall closet in its box. I could not tell you exactly why I keep it. It is scrap. It is worth $11 in copper, but it is the only object I have ever owned that told the truth about me when I could not. He doesn't live there, he just keeps his things there. That is what she believed about me, and she was wrong about it, in the only way that could be measured, and I got my home back, and my name back on it, and every dollar of the rent she took. I won it back. The exemption, the deed, the parking space, and $9,400 of rent that was never hers. So here is what I would want you to take from this, and it is not about air conditioners. If somebody files a paper about your life, the paper will be perfect. They always are. It will be signed and notarized and recorded, and it will be more convincing than you standing there, saying it is not so. Do not try to beat the paper with your word. Go and find the thing in your house that nobody could write up afterwards. Your meter, your filter, your water usage, the wear on your own stairs. A signature only proves somebody was willing to sign it. A machine records what actually happened. And when you find it, do not open it and start waving it around. Leave it alone until somebody with authority is standing next to you looking at it, because a thing you photographed is a thing you can be accused of arranging. If you got this far, hit like and subscribe to True Deceit Stories, and tell me in the comments, what is in your house that has been keeping a record you never asked it to keep?